Dong, supercalifragilistic her excellency.
You got it. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're in our second month of the Practicing Democracy, Voter Education, and Engagement workshop series. My name is Ellen Knutson, and I am the program manager for Practicing Democracy. As we're getting started here, it would be great if folks would like to introduce themselves in chat. Just say, who you are, where you're coming from, so we can have a sense for who is in the room. Today, our session is Know Your Ballot. And I'm really thrilled that Elizabeth Benny and Kara Dillard and Elizabeth Parmalee are here with us. But before I turn things over to them and give them a little bit more of an introduction, I want to say just a few words about the Practicing Democracy series. So over the next 2 months, we're going to continue to showcase speakers and projects that we hope stimulate conversation and demonstrate best practices to provide the kinds of critical resources that our campuses need for us to develop capacity and build a campus commitment to a healthy democracy. This month in March, you can see the list here on the slide. Our workshops will be discussing how we address political polarization, understanding voting as a social determinant of health, amongst other themes. At the end of today's session, I am going to highlight a few more of the upcoming sessions in a tiny bit more detail. And as we move into April, we'll focus on building campus community ties and integrating voter education in the classroom. And just as a reminder, we've been doing these beginning in February. If you've missed any of the February workshops, you can see them there on our website. I'm going to post into chat where you can read links to registering for the March and April workshops, and then also a link to the recordings for February. And now, and I also want to note that in June, we're going to have a voter engagement education summit during the Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement meeting, CLDE, in Detroit. So hope that you can join us there. And I'll put in the link to the CLDE meeting as well. All right, I've done all of my links now. And so I'm very thrilled now to give an introduction to today's presenters. Elizabeth Bennion is the Chancellor's Professor of Political Science and Director of Community Engagement at Indiana University, South Bend. She is also the longtime director of the Campus American Democracy Project. She promotes informed and engaged citizenship as a TV host, civic leader, frequent media commentator, and state debate commissioner. She's also received numerous local, state, and national teaching and service awards. Kara Dillard is an assistant professor of the School of Communication Studies at James Madison University, and also the associate director for the university's Madison Center for Civic Engagement. She works in university settings with community organizations to design public engagement processes that help groups address local wicked issues, both face-to-face and online. And Elizabeth Parmalee is the Associate Vice President of Undergraduate Studies at the Metropolitan State University of Denver. Shout out to Metro State, where I first started going to college. Charged with advancing civic engagement and the university's anchor mission, as well as overseeing academic programs that reach beyond the disciplines, such as the Honors Program, International Studies, and the Writing Center. So I'm going to, and this is the order in which they're going to say their initial remarks, not just because it's alphabetical order, but it also made some sense for the work that they're doing. So I will turn it over to Elizabeth. I'll stop my share.
Okay, thank you so much, Ellen. At Indiana University South Bend, the approach we take to helping students and members of the broader community get to know the candidates on their ballot really is threefold. The first is live candidate forums and debates. We do a lot of debates for municipal races, county races, as well as state legislative races and our US congressional races. That's where the debate commission, which I also serve on, steps in to do the US Senate and gubernatorial debates. With those debates, like Senate and governor, and also the presidential debates, we do debate watch parties. And what we do there is to have things like debate watch scorecards, debate watch bingo, and we will host both in person and now online. The online that we do is Discord. That did start with AASCU's big online party in 2020, where we set up a channel for all of the IU campuses, and then people across the country had various channels on a debate watch, later civic watch server. And that proved very useful to keep students engaged and interacting with each other and with some faculty and staff in a very different way than they can in the classroom. Students were listing stories that were relevant. They were answering each other's questions about policy. They were including memes, but also links to really good evidence and details. And so it was fascinating to see how quickly they can think and respond. And so then even the students who were attending the live parties with the pizza and pop and enjoying those things have liked participating online as well, which helps some of our students in online degree programs or who just live far from campus and are not going to come in for a 9 p.m. debate, and those who may take some courses online. Some instructors do build that into their course as an option or an enrichment project where students can do Discord or do a scorecard if they have to watch on their own because they're unable to join at that time. So lots of different opportunities for getting students engaged in learning the candidates by hearing from the candidates verbally or meeting some of those candidates on campus at a local library, at our Civil Rights Heritage Center. We try to host some of the debates in the communities where they're located. So we're doing a District 4 county council race. We'll put that in our Civil Rights Heritage Center, which is in District 4. When we hosted Mishawaka city council races, we did it at the Mishawaka Public Library. So we try to go to the district where that person's, where the candidates' constituents would be, and then bring our banners and materials to show that community engagement that we have. We also like bringing folks to campus from time to time, reminding them that we're a resource. So depending on the race, that may or may not be our chosen location. The other thing that some of you might also deal with is catering, and it can be more restrictive and expensive on campus. So if your budget is a problem, sometimes those off-campus venues are good for that reason as well. More flexibility. The other thing we do in terms of helping students get to know their candidates is an online voter guide. And I know that all of us here who are speaking today have different approaches to what that guide might look like. For us, what we decided to do was partner with the local League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters nationally has the Vote 411 platform, and it's a really good platform from a tech perspective because it allows you to build in the invitations and the reminders once you upload your spreadsheet of all the candidates' information, their names, their addresses, their emails. You have to gather all of that, but once you have that information, you can contact them easily. You can put whatever questions you'd like into the guide. You can put character limits. So if you only want them to answer in 500 characters or 750 characters. So you can do a word or a character limit there to make it more readable. And that also helps us to partner with local newspapers such as Elkhart Truth and the South Bend Tribune, who then print a selection of candidates' responses, particularly those who are running in contested races. And the Tribune reserves the right to print as many questions for each race as they wish, and they can pick and choose among the questions and then send people back to the guide to learn about candidates running in uncontested races or to hear more from the candidates. And they've done it both as a sort of pull-out guide with all the candidates in at the same time, and as a series of stories, which is what we've been doing recently. And then those can be shared on social media as well, kind of race by race with catchy headlines about each race and why people should get to know them. So that's a nice partnership. It works for them. As you know, most local newspapers are really hurting for staff. So for the American Democracy Project to have students who can do that tech end of the guide and really work on that, to partner with a local civic organization and with a newspaper helps us to reach a lot of people. And it also sends automatic reminders to the candidates. It will say candidate did not respond. When you remind them that that's what will be printed in the newspaper, that often lights a fire into them to get that in. I would say one thing that helps us in our particular case is good relationships with the party chairs of the Libertarian, Democratic, and Republican parties. And that's another thing that we as the American Democracy Project can bring to it, because League is very nonpartisan and scrupulous about the nonpartisanship in terms of voter education, but they also do some lobbying, which is something that we don't, of course, do with American Democracy Project. And so that relationship is helpful as well in making sure that all candidates feel comfortable answering and participating in the guide. So that's the approach that we take. And I can demonstrate some different, let's show you what that looks like, what, you know, nonpartisan race, partisan race, ballot initiatives. Maybe do we want to do the intros from each person first before doing demos? So I'll stop there because I know we want to have time for conversation and questions.
Kara. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Elizabeth, you're amazing. Both Elizabeths are amazing, but Elizabeth Benny, and you're a hard act to follow. I'm Kara Dillard. I'm at James Madison University, which is a public R2 about 2 hours outside of Washington, D.C. So we're not urban. We're not quite rural either. We're somewhere kind of in the mix of that. We're also not suburban, but we're a campus of about 20,000 plus students. And so we do a lot of the same things that Elizabeth just talked about. So candidate forums in which we're hosting like school board candidates, we're hosting city council, board of supervisor candidates. We have candidates for sheriff, for all sorts of folks. We have them. We organize candidate forums. We also invite candidates to come into residence halls of first-year students so that those first-year students can meet candidates in their home and we bring pizza and cookies and stuff like that so that they can have a more relaxed and intimate conversation with candidates. So where they get to talk personally with those candidates instead of candidates being on a stage. We get them off their talking points, getting them really in these kinds of more comfortable situations with students. We also do a variety of other things, including we have a life-size sample ballot, which has its own social media account and social media following, and is a campus star and gets retweeted by our main campus social media accounts. It's actually, our students have a lot of fun interacting with the sample ballot. One of the things that we also do is a voter guide. And the voter guide, whereas I think Elizabeth has like this really awesome plan, the voter guide, our approach to a voter guide has really left me in knots. And over the last year or so, one of the things that to me was important about a voter guide is that it be student researched and written. In the past, we've actually had a whole class in a fall semester devoted, an interdisciplinary class out of our X Labs program devoted to writing, researching, interviewing candidates, and then publishing a voter guide. So this was really student driven. And those students interviewed the local school board, people running for like soil, water conservation director, all the way to governor and our federal representatives. But what we found is that the problem we've had is that that's so much effort for such a little return on investment. We were finding that our students were doing a bunch of other things to find out information about candidates, but not the thing that we were putting in a lot of effort and money and time into, which was developing this kind of voter guide. And so we've racked our brains here in my office and trying to think of a way that we can match both the student learning process of students researching and putting together a voter guide for their peers, and getting something that our 20,000 students would actually put their eyeballs to look. I'm not sure that we've got the answer to that. I'm not sure that we have the answer to that. But one of the things that I think we're going to approach and try to do for the fall semester is, instead of leading with candidates where we have students interview candidates, they scribe those answers, we push print on a PDF, which is the old analog model, that instead we're going to lead with issues. And I think we're going to try to lead with helping students figure out their own thoughts on issues, how they're thinking, where they might align with issues. And then once we lead students through that process, then opening up a discussion that we have with candidates, so candidate responses to some of those issues, so that students learn about themselves, they learn about where they might approach issues, and then what the candidates that might better align with those issues, so that they find where they are, and then that might help them find the candidate that might best represent them from local to national elections. Again, I'm not entirely sure how we're going to do that. We looked at things like isidewith.com and trying to build in some kind of format of isidewith.com into like a quiz, and then we would have some kind of other interactive piece that allows them to interact with candidate answers. But all that said, the idea is we 100% want to reapproach this idea that issue guides have to be totally analog, that we want to make sure that students are at the heart of developing that issue guide, and that it's for students as well. And probably trying to, maybe especially in this upcoming election, make it issue focused, that then leads students to candidates instead of candidate focused, and trying to have students trying to read through and suss out which candidate might be best for them. That's our approach. I'm not sure that we have the best answer, but we're a campus, and maybe it's a campus like yours that's struggling with how to think about what is the best way to use a voter guide to get students interested and knowledgeable about what's on the ballot and who's on the ballot.
Great, thanks, Kara. And then Elizabeth Parmalee.
Yes, thank you. Elizabeth and Kara, that's great. And it makes me feel very like, oh my gosh, we don't do a whole lot. Now, I want to do a little bit of context setting too, because I think one of the interesting differences so far between Elizabeth and Indiana and Kara and Virginia is just the differences between campuses and location and context. So I'm going to do a really quick overview of Metropolitan State University of Denver, so that people can get a sense of the differences across our campus. So we're a large urban campus. We're not any larger than JMU, but we're very much urban. We're right downtown in downtown Denver. And we're actually 3 institutions on one campus, which is both really cool and really challenging. So we have a community college, Metropolitan State, and then the University of Colorado at Denver. And we're 3 completely separate institutions. It's not that like we have a graduate school and we have a community college within our institutional structure. We are completely autonomous, 3 completely different institutions. We're also basically entirely non-residential. There are a few private owned student facilities right at the edges of campus, and the University of Colorado at Denver has 1 dormitory, but for Metropolitan State University and for the community college, pretty much all of our students live off campus, mostly at home. We're highly non-traditional. So many of our students live at home in their home, not in their parents' home. They have kids, etc. We're also very highly diverse, both in terms of ethnicity, race, and also first-gen status, low-income status, age, etc. And then here's another thing that I think makes a big difference across campuses is the state context. So Colorado is one of the top states in terms of being voter-friendly. And the 2022 elections, we had the 5th highest voter turnout at the state level. I'm not talking university level. At the state level, 5th highest voter turnout. So we're a state that makes it incredibly easy for people to vote. Everybody who is a registered voter receives a mail-in ballot in the mail. It's not something you have to opt into or request. So we don't have absentee voting, for example. We do also have voter locations, so people can go and turn in their vote at a voter location, but they can simply sit at home with their ballot on the dining room table and walk through it and take their time and spend hours investigating everything before dropping it in a drop box. And we have both a voter location and a drop box on campus. 96% of our students live in state or are from within the state. So we don't do a lot of voter education for outside states. We really focus on Colorado. And yet we serve a 7-county area. So our ballots for our students can look dramatically different from one student to the next. So we can't hone in on a single set of candidates and a single set of issues. We have to make sure our students know which ballot they will be receiving and which issues are on their ballot, because it won't be the same. A lot of our students don't live in the city and county of Denver itself because it's a very high cost of living to live in the city. A lot of our students live on the adjacent suburbs where cost of living is lower. And then the last thing I'll add, for all that we're a very voter-friendly state, we're also renowned for the length of some of our ballots. And we have these crazy issues that get put on the ballot every year in, year out, even in the off years. Even last year, there were some crazy issues on the ballot. And our ballots have been up to 3 pages long because of that. And sometimes the issues are directly contradictory of each other. So on a single ballot, we could have an issue on something and another issue on that same topic that if you were to vote yes for both of them, you would basically be contradicting yourself. Yet it's not always obvious because the wording isn't always obvious on those issues. Some of those issues are referred by the legislature. Our legislature cannot increase taxes without referring the question to the citizens. So there's often, almost always, issues that are related to tax issues. And then others are by petition. So there's almost always some group out there that has put some issue on the ballot that they want people to vote on. Because of that, I'll say, we really focus on the issues, not so much the candidates. We're also, being right in the middle of Denver, we're in a very media heavy area. So rather than feeling like we need to do candidate guides and pull all the information together, I know some of our faculty assign that to students for an individual class, but we don't try as a campus to produce issue guides written by students or done by our own staff. We really rely on all of our partners in the community. So whether it's the league, the various media, some of the think tanks, we have just a surfeit of great places that do great issue guides and that lean one way or the other. So we can put an issue guide that leans more to the right and an issue guide that leans more to left and let students read both. We also have a statewide and local issue guides that are required to go out to all voters that are sort of translating the legalese into regular English and then include the comments of anyone who submitted comments for the pro side and the con side of any particular issue. So we have a lot of information out there. That's not our issue. Our issue is helping students wade through the information and figure out how to evaluate the accuracy and perspective of all of that information. So we've really spent time trying to make sure that students access their information, the information that's out there, know where to find it, know how to think about it, know what questions to ask themselves. Our biggest way of doing that, and it's not the only thing we do, but it's what I sort of want to focus on here, is by having what we call our ballot party. So because everybody receives their ballot in the mail, we invite students to come to an event on campus that's sort of around the corner from the polling location and bring their ballot with them, or in case they've left theirs at home, we always have sort of blank ballots that aren't real ballots. They can't take those and go vote with them, but they can make crib sheets on it. And then we invite community agencies and partners, the clerk and recorder's office, et cetera, to set up a table in that location. And we try to have a table for every single thing on the ballot, particularly the issues, not so much the candidates. So we'll have the league take on one issue, we'll have another organization take on another issue, and we'll let students go from one table to the next or go to the table of the issue that they're most confused by or torn over and have a conversation at that table to help them sort of think about the issue, how to understand the issue, and help them make their own decision about that issue. We really emphasize look for the information, evaluate the information, and then make your own decision based on your values and your perspectives on that issue. So that's in a nutshell what we've been doing. There's a whole bunch of other things we do year in, year out. We have a government relations team that invites candidates to campus. Candidates almost always want to come to our campus. Hillary Clinton came to our campus because we serve about 30 to 40,000 students by the time you add all 3 institutions together. So I will stop there and let's see what questions people have.
Great. So I know Elizabeth wanted to have a quick follow-up, but before you jump in. Let me just also say to folks who are here that we do want this to be a bit of a conversation. So be thinking about your questions and what you'd like more information on now that you've gotten this broad overview of what folks are doing.
Yes, I just wanted to echo a few of the points that Elizabeth just made about context. It's easy for us to compare ourselves to other campuses, but our contexts are so different that it's really important to keep that in mind. I know Indiana University Bloomington, for example, they're never going to win the Big Ten voting challenge, right? Because we do not have contested presidential elections. We don't have very many contested elections. We have super majority in both chambers in the state legislature, right? There's not a lot of competition to drive students to the polls. That's a very different and more challenging environment in terms of voter turnout than a swing state, for example, in a presidential election year. So all of that matters. Housing is a huge thing of what you can actually do. We have a limited amount of housing. It's full, but it's only 400 people. What made that important for us was if you're going to have a gubernatorial debate watch party at 7 p.m. or a presidential debate watch party that starts at 8:30, but the speech doesn't go till 9, or State of the Union, people are not going to come back from whatever county they live in to campus that late at night. It's just not realistic. But the students who are at housing, and you give the free food and all that, they will come. And sometimes a friend may stay over, which is allowed. And then also some members of the community come. So that made that kind of event possible, but also had us thinking about how do we involve those folks who can't get to student housing. It was also important to make sure that housing would open that community building to non-residents so that all students could participate. I also thought the whole issue of the ballot party is wonderful. In Indiana, our students, by and large, cannot vote by mail. It's just not an option for them. We do not have, we're one of the few states that do not have, no excuse, absentee by mail balloting. And so if they were over 65, they could vote by mail. But as a young person, it's very difficult to get that legal excuse and file all the forms that you would need to get that mail-in ballot. So all of those kinds of things are different. We don't have many people doing voter guides at all, but our media market is very much centralized in South Bend, where my campus is located. So all of our ABC, CBS, NBC affiliates are here, as well as our PBS station for television and our public radio station. And so that goes out to 17 Indiana counties, 5 Michigan counties, but it's centralized here. So we can often get folks to do things, even have the 3 commercial stations all partner with us to air a congressional debate, with each one getting being one of the moderators, having their anchors do that. So there are different resources and advantages and disadvantages, or not necessarily even advantage or disadvantage, but just factors that will determine what you're able to do on your campus that I think are critically important. I do think Elizabeth mentioned the clerk's office. That's critically important. We have a new clerk. She came to power in a way that perhaps was a little bit controversial in terms of did the previous clerk, who wasn't even on the ballot, throw away ballots? The courts say she didn't, but there was a big scandal. So there's a lot of division surrounding the clerk's office, but this clerk has gotten federal grants. She wants to work directly with us on college poll workers, on having internships for the college students, on all of these kinds of issues. So that's really useful, whether the person is a Democrat or Republican. If they're wanting to work with you, that can be incredibly useful for your students and open up lots of opportunities. And so that's been a nice relationship that we have here in the county seat. So the clerk's office is not too far from campus, which also, of course, helps.
Great, thanks. Nancy Chronic has put a couple of questions into chat, which was, does anybody translate into other languages like Spanish with the materials that they're doing, and a question about turnout. And Nancy, I don't know if that question was campus specific, like what the student turnout is.
I can answer for Colorado. We're required, not we, the university. The clerk and recorder's offices are required to translate into other languages, and it's based on percent of population or the number of population that have that language as a first language in the home. So we definitely in Spanish, and in some cases in Denver, we also have some other languages that we translate the voter guides into. And then our turnout, I don't really know this off the top of my head. I made a note of it before we started today. So our voter turnout in the state we don't have the 2022 yet from NSolve, but for 2020, we had a 76.4% turnout of eligible voters. I was going to reach out to the elections office to say, wait, does eligible mean registered or eligible? I think it means eligible to register. So include non-registered people. And then MSU using that same calculation that comes off of the NSolve was 75.4. So almost the same at the university as at the state. And quite high. And that was in 2020.
In ours, we have not translated our voter guide currently, but that capability exists within Vote 411. And it's actually, we have a growing Latino population in particular in our area, and we are on track to become an HSI over the next couple of years. So that is definitely something that we'd like to do, is to provide the guide in both English and Spanish. Those would be our two primary languages in this area. And our voter turnout for students was roughly the same as the national turnout for students in the last few election cycles for which we have data, which isn't too bad given the lack of competitiveness in the state.
Our voter turnout rate is very similar to Elizabeth Parmalee's. I think 70 some odd % of our eligible students voted in the 2020 election. I think we had a student registration number in the 90s. So we always frame this whenever we talk to students when we go into classrooms as, we're the JMU Dukes vote, that, look around you. Almost everybody in your class has been registered to vote, and 3 out of the 4 of you. So everybody probably sitting around you went and voted in the last election. Are you registered to vote? And that has been a really compelling message to getting our students to turn out to vote.
So for the folks in the room, I'm again want to be sure that we're opening to your questions or things that you've tried on your campuses that you found successful, that you'd want to share. We'd love to hear about that as well, or what you're struggling with. If there's a thing that the knowledge that's in this room can help you with, that's what we're here for as well. And I will ask, as people are getting their thoughts together, excuse me, I know that each of you have, been doing this work for a while, and I'm wondering if you feel like there was a turning point in your work where, however you want to interpret turning points, and what happened and why.
I can start with that just really quickly. I think our turning point has been at some point, and I want to say it was about 2-3 years. It was actually probably during COVID, which is an odd point to have this, but our turning point was when we really began to be able to institutionalize the work. It doesn't mean that it's always the same people or that we have a full-time person doing this work. We don't. We're working across 3 institutions, and that's both a weakness and a strength. But I think leaning in on that strength was when one of us was, let's just say, slipping or slacking because we had leadership change or, staff who had left, who took the expertise with them. Another campus was always ready to step up. So now we're at the point where every year, year in, year out, we have monthly, if not more often, meetings of the area votes team. Student presence within that may ebb and flow depending on what leaders graduate and leave us without a student presence. But there's always people who are coming to the table and having the conversation and making the plans year in, year out. And I think that was really our turning point. I will add one other thing, which isn't quite to that question, but I'll just put it out there. I don't know how many people have campuses with high non-citizen populations there are, but we also do strive to make sure our language is inclusive in that sense. So even though we're a area of votes and we focus on voter engagement and voter education, we also always have sort of an additional angle where we talk to people about, if you aren't eligible to vote, here's the ways you can still participate. Here's the ways you can talk to the people you know who can vote and explain why their vote matters because you don't have a vote. And so we try to make sure that those people who don't have the eligibility to vote still feel like they're part of this work.
We also do something very similar to what Elizabeth just mentioned. It has been one of, I think, the most important initiatives that we have. We have a democracy, across barriers program, which is funded from a donor that really we work with students on campus who are not documented. We work in the community. We are in an immigrant and refugee community, and so we do a lot of that work. We had an event on campus just for JMU students. Can you pass the citizenship test? And it was really illuminating. We loved it. We were just, fly on the wall. Students said, whoa, that's really hard. And it's those kinds of light bulb moments that help students realize that, there are people who don't get to participate in the way that they do, and that those barriers are real, and that we need to be cognizant of those barriers. So absolutely, when opportunities arise to do that kind of work, it's incredibly helpful.
I would say of the regional campuses of Indiana University, we have by far the largest international student population, and that is a group that gets involved with American Democracy Project and is registering and educating other students while learning about U.S. representative democracy. And so that's always a nice link there so that students, whether they're DACA or international, can see other students who aren't citizens still getting engaged in the process and recognizing how enthusiastic they are about what they're learning is very, very helpful. They're our best ambassadors in that respect. So I know Kayla asked about how to get folks involved who, are across the disciplines and in different units. I think that can always be an issue. I know when American Democracy Project started, George Mahaffey kept talking about institutional intentionality, and now a lot of the vote groups talk about your voting plan, and I think that's really important. Sometimes it's easier to put it on paper than to carry it out, however. And so that's something that we want to do more and more of. We have found the faculty civic champion model fairly successful. It's an easy lift for faculty. If you pre-script all of the messages and announcements, those who want to do something but don't have a lot of time and aren't comfortable figuring out how to message it, or are wondering how to make that seem relevant to their discipline, appreciate some discipline specific language, or at least area specific. So whether it's healthcare or economics, right, or sociology. And so we provide them with those tailored messages that they can use to encourage students to get out and vote, also reminding them that our campus encourages all students who are eligible to participate in the process and make their own decisions. And so that's really useful. That's also a way that we can encourage them to post a variety of things, which would include some upcoming opportunities for debate watch parties, for example, linked to the voter guide, and as well as reminders about registration deadlines, where to register, how to register, and then how to vote. So even if they can't make it to the party, to the polls, maybe they do, maybe they don't, they're at least getting those reminders in Canvas. And because the faculty across the disciplines, all they have to do is just cut and paste. That's an easy thing for them to do, even if they're not heavily engaged. And then some will open up talks and discussions with their particular units or host their own events. But it's a nice way to start getting those disciplines to think about why they should be engaged. And then we hope to take that the next step forward as we're now reorganizing the campus to really embed everybody in the vote plan and having that active role. I will say, because I meet regularly with folks from all the other IU campuses, not having anyone on the campus that's specifically in charge of the work is a big problem for a lot of campuses. Even some of the bigger campuses that have large civic kind of civic education or civic engagement centers are not necessarily tasked with reporting back on voting work. And so it's an extra thing that they're doing. A lot of ADP coordinators may just be a junior faculty member who is told, oh, you can do that as part of your service with no budget and no release time. So that's one thing I've been pretty clear about in terms of our campus. It's still way more than one course, but I do have a course release. I do have a budget, and that has made a huge, huge difference. And at one point, our campus was looking at, reducing course releases, cutting budgets. So we're just not going to be able to support that. And I said, I'm so terribly sorry that we won't be having an American Democracy Project unless you already know somebody who's willing to do it with no time and no resources. And I said, that I didn't, no, it's a labor of love. And I said, it is, but only if I can do it well. There's plenty of other labor going on. So I think, that is really a question. Do you have institutional intentionality? Is somebody getting the type of time required? And then I work with a large number of students, which is very time consuming. And the way that we do that, though, is either give them fieldwork credit in political science or work study, which by the way, the government has been paying at 100% since the pandemic, but normally pays 75%. So that even if you have very tight budgets like we do, that's an affordable way to get students involved and have them have regular weekly office hours to do this kind of work if you're not designing a whole class around it.
Great, and I'll just piggyback on that very quickly on the sort of federal work study dollars and refer people to some of the resources that were in the Show Me the Money workshop that we did in February, where there's a lot about how you can use those federal work study dollars on your campus with students to do this nonpartisan voting engagement.
And of course, the Department of Education just put out their new Dear Colleague letter clarifying that, yes, indeed, work study can be used for nonpartisan voter engagement work, which is useful too for those who weren't sure or were nervous about it.
Right. And Shannon Williams had put a comment into chat a bit ago about a struggle they're having with getting beyond just the logistics of knowing what's on the ballot because their students are having a lot of different ballots. So interested in moving beyond the mechanics, but struggling to come up with engaging ideas. I don't know if any of the three of you have thoughts on that.
I mean, I think in many ways we look like, air quotes, a community college in the sense that we're basically open access. We are non-residential. I mean, in many ways, our population looks like a community college population, and we do have the issue of students living all across 7 different counties. So I don't know if I would say that we've hit on incredibly engaging things other than the ballot party. But I think the key is when there's so many different ballots that different students are going to be up against, is making sure you have good ways of pointing them to the resources that are out there. Assuming that, I mean, at a community college, you're not going to have the resources, I would assume, to put together your own voter guides for all of these multiple counties that students are living in, which was our dilemma. Like, we just knew we couldn't do it. We could probably do it for one county, but that would only be maybe 10% of our population. So leaning on the other resources that are out there and then figuring out a way to drive students to those resources, I think is I'm stumbling over the engaging part of it, because I think we are constantly looking at whether we're engaging students as much as we mean to, but that seems to be the preliminary answer, is just pointing them to information that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon, that was our problem too, is you know, we are a campus of 20,000 students, but I would say maybe half of those are actual, they come from you know, a community in Virginia, that everybody else is from North Carolina, DC, Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, New Jersey, New York, you know, other states. And so we've had to be very cognizant, you know, when we do classroom visits, for example, that we're not just Virginia centric, because we know that probably maybe only a third of those students in that classroom that we're talking to would actually just be Virginia voters. You know, so we try to, you know, we try to encourage students to register to vote locally. That helps. And we try to explain how your local elected, you're a resident here in the area for 10 months out of the year, you go home maybe for 2 months. But really the, you know, the candidates that you vote for here locally matter far more to your quality of life. Policing of parties, noise ordinances, traffic ordinances, bus and transportation issues. But we really try to pitch that, like, try to register locally, because it really matters for the, you know, for the 4 years times 10 months that you live here. It will really impact you on a daily basis. But as we thought about our voter guide, as we thought about how to utilize our social media, we really tried to leverage our social media, and we use our work study student to primarily work on social media aspects of voter engagement. So we've got the 20 plus hours, or however many hours she works, and, you know, her job is, you know, voters, informational graphics, Q&A in a cup, you know, videos, all of that stuff that are, you know, here, Pennsylvania voters, here's where you go find your information, and here's what's on the ballot, New York voters, and so on. Again, I think, like Elizabeth, like everybody else said, like I'm not sure that we've got it right, but we've had to really be cognizant of that. Our students come from all over the place. And it can be really hard to engage those students. So we've tried like an absentee voter party, you know, get a notary, get some stamps, we'll get an envelope, you come, we'll help you answer your questions, we'll help you print off your ballot, send it. And that's, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of campuses, hopefully that helps, that a lot of other campuses struggle with this. You're not out there all by yourself. Sometimes that's helpful. But I think it really is a challenge.
Yeah, I think if most of the students are from 1 or 2 states, so we're in Michiana, so Michigan, Indiana border, then it does open itself up to do at least some things like a Discord debate watch party where you're all watching together and commenting and linking. And some faculty could even build that in, or student organizations, to try to get involvement and engagement there, so that the students are getting interested in that race, and then could get links saying, hey, see who's else on your ballot here, investigate those races there, right? And so that at least gets them, they have some races in common, not so much on Kara's campus where they're from so many different states, but in a lot of community colleges or regional comprehensive colleges, most people are from 1 or at most 2 states. So you can at least get them at that level. And then also obviously the presidential debate watch parties, to get them thinking about candidates and then give them the information they need to find out more about those local candidates. I think this is also, I mean, even with social media graphics, that can all be a full-time job where some of the national student vote organizations can help us. And I think they are really trying to do that. We're seeing a lot more pushed out about primaries. One of the challenges is, though, it might be more helpful to have everything in the summer up front, like in a folder that we could use. And so like each month, well, wait, you have a late primary, so, you know, 3 months from now, you'll see something, but we're all so busy and scrambling and doing so many other things that it's hard to respond and react and customize. And so I think that's just some calibration in terms of how all of us can work better with national organizations in terms of what we need, or across our systems. One of the things we were talking about with IU, of how difficult it was for some of the campuses to do a coordinated campaign recently when we tried, because they just got so buried. They wanted to do what I was sending them and asking them to do, but they just couldn't. And so having it all up front, here's the folder, here's everything written out, here's the sample tweets, here it's on your Outlook calendar. Okay, who can you partner with, knowing you know, a couple months in advance that you need to delegate this, will also be helpful. So in all of our copious spare time, but I think the pre-planning probably is critical for all of us. And that's where that campus action plan can be useful if we actually use it to plan rather than just put it on a paper to get a most engaged campus status or whatever it is from Holland.
Great, thanks. I'm just gonna post into chat real quick a link to a workshop evaluation in hopes that you all will click on it and have it open to fill out as we're coming to the end here. But I did also want to note another question in chat, which was about around the discussion of engaging faculty on your campuses, and the question of if you've had much success with faculty in the humanities. I see some nods.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of our fairly close partners are in art and in theater, and in philosophy. We frequently do, last year we did a religion and civic engagement event and had folks from our religion and philosophy department come and talk about, and it was also student moderated, but talk about like, what is this intersection between my political identity and my religious identity, and when do they, how do we navigate when they conflict? How do we talk with others, with our peers, about when they conflict and how we should talk about those things? And that was actually one of our most attended events, and I think one of our more exciting events, and we actually did it after the election. I mean, it just kind of worked out that way. But so, I think so. And I think there's a lot of faculty champions on that part of campus that would love to be involved in this work too.
I'll say, I'm trying to think about specifically the humanities. I think we have an easier time engaging faculty from the social sciences and the humanities. Our challenge tends to be engineering, industrial design, some of those areas, although we're working on it. So I feel like it just depends on the particular year and the topics that are arising in conversations and which faculty feel like they have some free time. I will say we try not to ask a lot of our faculty because we know they have a heavy course load, they have heavy demands on their time, so we try to just make things super easy for them to do. But the flip side of that is that means we don't always know what they're doing. So I'm sure we have more faculty in the humanities and even in the social sciences doing things that we're just not even aware of. I know at one point a computer science faculty amazed me by reaching out to say, I came up with an assignment that was a coding assignment related to voter engagement. And it was just a simple, in his computer science 1 course, he had students code, develop a little program that would write vote with an exclamation point when you ran the program. But hey, it was something. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It always amazes me when I hear of just faculty who are doing voting things. Faculty say, we had a faculty member, okay, this is kind of not legal, so I didn't say this, but requiring for an assignment that students show that they've registered to vote. Well, you probably can't do that, but hey, I don't know that. But this was some faculty I had never met, had never heard of, but they took it upon themselves to be engaged and to really build it into their coursework. And I think this was a music professor to build that into their course. And that was just fantastic. We just kind of heard off the side, somebody said, yeah, my professor is doing that. And it's one of those things that you're like, okay, I probably need to talk to that professor to make sure that they're not doing illegal things. But I want to champion the effort that they're, yeah, you're doing it. Awesome. That's great. But it's always wonderful when you hear of colleagues across campus who you don't know, and you've got to, we're always trying to find those faculty and then always trying to build them into our faculty voting championship program like Elizabeth has. We have one similar, so that we can further build out this network of faculty colleagues on campus who could look at each other and say, hey, yeah, we're all in this together alongside our students. And that's really seemed to help encourage faculty morale and encourage student morale when they hear it from their faculty members. And I also think that it challenges this notion that when faculty talk about politics on campus, or in their classrooms that it's always the negative kind of politics, like they're sharing their political views, but here's an opportunity for faculty to talk about politics in a nonpartisan way that supports democracy, that hopefully students don't feel like it's partisan.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical as more and more states, including my own state of Indiana, are changing their laws to be more similar to Florida's and to have the possibility of tenure being stripped away for lack of what they call intellectual diversity, but they mean ideological diversity in the classroom and on the syllabus, that faculty will be more reticent than ever, perhaps, to engage in anything that seems political. And so having that, what you can do, what you can't do, having the pre-scripted messages, having the one-on-one outreach as well as training sessions will be incredibly important, as well as the institution stressing that this is part of what we do, and here's what you say and don't say. You're not going to tell them who to vote for, or we need more young people to vote for because you think it will benefit a particular party or movement. And so all of that probably becomes more important than ever for those of us who are leading the efforts on our campuses to make sure that we're giving faculty verbally and in writing the information they need to feel comfortable and confident doing this work.
Great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time here. Please join me in giving a round of applause, virtual applause to Elizabeth, Kara, and Elizabeth. I'm just going to put up on the screen here the upcoming workshops and highlight this Friday will be Lenita Johnson from Peril is going to lead us through evidence-based strategies to prevent and address supremacist rhetoric, violence, polarization, misogyny, and disinformation on campus. I'm looking forward to that. I'm not going to read through the rest. You can take a look at our website and register for the ones that are of interest to you. Again, I just want to say thank you so much to Kara, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth for your time, for your wisdom, for your experience. It's been wonderful to have you with us. But I'm going to let you, the three of you, have the final word. If you have, 30 seconds each on, maybe the thing that you're most looking forward to in the, as we're approaching this 2024 election season. I guess we're in the midst of it. We're not approaching it.
It's already on us. I'm in a Super Tuesday state, so I've got my ballot that I need to drop and take a picture of myself dropping tomorrow. Now I'll just say, don't be intimidated by how big it can be, and find like one thing or two things that you want to try and tackle. I was emailing with a colleague on the other side of the mountains who was asking for some guidance, and I was like, find one thing, plan one thing, whether it's National Voter Registration Day, whatever it is, just plan one thing, because it helps avoid feeling intimidated by how much you could do and how much everybody else does. It feels like everybody else is always doing something more than you are, but that's not really true. That's just our imposter syndrome.
So I would say sharing resources is useful. So I do have a bingo card and a scorecard for anyone who wants to try online or in-person debates and doesn't want to reinvent the wheel. I agree with Elizabeth, primarily do what you can do, and you'll have to be good with that, but also to think about everything we're doing across the university that is needed to sustain a representative democracy. That in our democratic republic, we're going to need critical thinking skills, information literacy skills, deliberation skills. So there's so much more that helps students become civically educated, but also to develop that identity as somebody who's a civic actor, and then who, of course, they'll vote because that's how they think of themselves. So even if you're not doing as much as you think you might to let them know about every single person on the ballot, if they have those skills, they're going to be more able to find out that information themselves. If we provide them the basic information, they'll be able to do a lot of the rest of it on their own. That's the goal.
Absolutely. I'll echo what the Elizabeth just said. I just, I would encourage everybody just to remember that you're not in this work alone, that there are other people on your campus in academic affairs, in student affairs, who want to join you in this work. Maybe they don't know about you. Maybe they don't know about your work. Maybe you don't know about them, but try to find the pockets of people who do and can help you in this work, whether that's in Res Life, whether that's in orientation, whether that is in the registrar's office, whether that is in your provost office or something, the bookstore, dining services, that there are people on your campus who want to do this work alongside you.
Great. And again, I'll just say thank you, thank you, thank you to the Elizabeth and to Kara. We've come to the end. So thanks to everybody also who has attended. It has been a terrific 1 hour that just flew by. So
thank you all.